So I think the question is, what does it take to get Indians to pay for content? Will they carry on paying? And how would we change into the future so that that becomes either as important a part of our revenue or a more important part as time goes on? So I think that we'll quickly flick through, give each of the panelists a couple of minutes to give us their version of where they are in the pay game, if you like, and what they see happening and what they have to do to get Indians to pay. And then I'll perhaps have a question or two and we'll open it up for a good discussion from the floor. We'd certainly expect a lot of questions. As previous moderators have said, we'd like questions, not comments or books I've read. Okay, to start, Rohin.
Thanks, Colin. A quick bit of introduction to who I am. I'm Rohin, one of the co-founders of The Ken. We're a subscription-based business news site. We launched roughly about 2 years back. Next month it'll be 2 years to the date, actually. We just do one story a day. We cover business, technology, and healthcare. We've been behind a paywall since day one. And this is the question that Colin asked, will Indians pay, is essentially the question that sustains our business. If Indians don't pay, we don't have a business. It's as quite simple as that. It took us a while. I would say the first 3 to 6 months were us conducting experiments and asking what will you pay for, and if we just give you one story a day, will you pay for it? How much will you pay for it? And to be fair, we kind of charge a premium over what people expect. An annual subscription costs about 3,200 rupees. But now I can say with certainty that there's a fair number of Indians, and across segments, from college students to working professionals to entrepreneurs, VCs, policy makers, etc., who will pay. It's not in doubt anymore. It helps if what you're selling is original, exclusive, not available elsewhere, which is why therefore you'll typically tend to see business publications, niche publications succeeding more at it. That said, it's one of the mistakes that most people make is by trying to compare the size or scale of the percentage of people who pay versus those who are willing to read it for free. It's orders of magnitude different, but I don't even think it's a comparison, right? So there'll always be people who just want news and they will not pay for it, and there'll always be a very small but profitable and indulgent audience, an intelligent audience that will pay for it, and that's what we're going after.
Okay, Sanjay.
Hi, so I'm Sanjay. I head the ET Digital portfolio, and we are the latest entrant on the block, so to speak, in terms of a paywall product. We launched almost 4 months back, and like Rohin said, initial success has been good, and that was expected because, you see, it's not a question of Indians will pay or not. I think Indians are very value-conscious audience. If they see value in what they are paying for, they don't mind paying. So I think the whole proposition has to be what you are giving to your consumers in terms of content behind a paywall. Is it adding value to what they do? And in the business scenario, I think that value proposition is one, very easily articulated, because it could so happen that, we, for instance, give 3 articles every day, right? And even if one article in the whole year becomes a game changer for something that you're doing, you're looking for some data point, some insight, that itself gives you a very high ROI. So I think the essential point is, if you really produce good quality, distinct, insightful content, and that's for business genre. For entertainment, the parameters will be very different. But if you're able to do that and demonstrate it consistently, Indians will pay. The big question is, how many will pay? When will it scale up? Rohin rightly said, when you compare it to the free media, the metrics are going to be very different. And even in a country like US and Europe, when you look at a WSJ or FT, it's taken them 20 years to reach a million mark of subscribers out there. So, it's a long journey. It's not like overnight people will start paying. It'll take a lot of perseverance. It'll take a lot of effort. You'll have to communicate that value, you'll have to demonstrate that value, and people will pay. I mean, that's what our belief is, and that's what the initial response shows.
Hi, I'm Shivendra from Business Standard. We went pay around 2 years back. We are as such a legacy brand, almost 45-year-old. Closer. Yeah. So we are actually a 45-year-old brand, but we decided to go pay around 2 years back. And like Sanjay and Rohin said, our initial experience has been very good. We are happy with the numbers. Of course, we could have been happier, but it's a long process. And but what we are really realizing is that there are mostly when we talk in media panels, we talk about news and entertainment. And the way we look at our business, we are actually also in the opinion and analysis segment of the business. And we are realizing that when we really deal with that opinion and analysis piece of the business, there is a segment of audience who's willing to pay. And that is what we are really trying to address right now. I hope that in future we are able to expand it to good news stories also. Because ultimately, when we really went pay, we analyzed that advertising alone will specially not work for mediums like ours, which are serious journalism-oriented products. So that is really...
Okay. Sanjay, does advertising put off people who are paying? It's been referred to, I referred to it, but several people did this morning, how, in a sense, modern media shows us that you tend to either pay or you get something for free with advertising. And yet traditional media is trying to perpetuate both of those, right?
So I think it's the way you look at advertising, and I think something somebody in the earlier panels mentioned, is that advertising also, at the end of the day, it's content. Is it adding value? Are you showing me an ad for something that is relevant to me? Then I don't think people mind. And I mean, the kind of clicks we see on the ads are because people kind of are interested in those ads, they see value, they want to discover more. So the fact is that obstructive advertising is something which people don't like because it comes in the way of user experience. But if you are doing good advertising, whether it's through branded content, whether it's display, at times it adds value. And I mean, for instance, I get a stack of newspapers in my office every day still. And I actually do it for advertising. I don't look at the content, because content, most of it I've read the day before. But I actually skim through the papers just to look at the advertising and see, who are the new advertisers, what is happening. So, I mean, it depends on what your context is. And for some people, advertising is value. For some people, content is value. Depends on where you're coming from. But
Okay.
user experiences, I think, the keyword.
Just to push that a little bit, because I think most of us listening to that will say, well, that's logical, but which advertising will you turn down? Or have you ever turned down?
So I think it's not about saying no to, so there are certain kinds of ads, and I can tell you for sure that there are certain kinds of clients and ads that I have actually asked my sales team to shut down on ET. Having said that, it's about finding the right consumer for the right ad. I think that's where the key is. So we reach out to 40 million people on a monthly basis, right? And I also have almost 200 key clients who advertise on ET. Now figuring out and pushing the right ad to the right user reduces the friction, makes the ad relevant, improves the performance, improves the business ROI. So I think that's what is required to be done.
Okay. Rowan, you don't take advertising at all? No?
No, we do not.
So would you turn down a sponsor or an advertisement for something you thought your readers were interested in or not? Would you always turn down advertising?
In our current model, we don't see any space for advertising because it helps us.
Sort of slightly avoiding it.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry, that's slightly avoiding the question, but you know what I mean?
I'm saying that I'm not closing myself to the possibility. For instance, one of the things, the way we look at advertising is from a different way. We see advertising as it exists in the older construct as a way for someone to pay for the news because reader isn't paying, right? The way we look at it is slightly differently. We say that, look, today let's say X number of users are paying us 3,000 rupees a year, what would it take for, let's say, us to take this to, let's say, students or bootstrapped entrepreneurs who perhaps cannot afford that? And can we get in someone else who could pay for that, but not through advertising, right? So we kind of look at it very differently. We've created a bunch of patron plans, but we make it very clear, saying that, look, what you're doing is essentially you're paying us to make our product available to these people, but you're not paying us to get in front of them and display your ads. So we've slightly, I mean, I agree in the philosophy of perhaps a third party subsidizing the cost of creating, original news, right? But not in the way of advertising being that construct.
Okay. Shivendra, does it matter, essentially you're paying readers are paying you for providing the whole lot of content. Does it inevitably have to come down to giving them the choice of buying one story or the whole lot or bits of? Do you have to disaggregate eventually?
Well, it's of course the readers prefer buying as per their wish. So, there are a lot of readers who want to just read a single story. And similarly, there are readers who want to read the whole segment. But what does happen is, given the price points in India for subscriptions that all of us are trying, they are so low that to try a smaller price point for single article readership would actually make it completely unviable for most of us. And then there is a significant issue in India right now with the whole payment mechanism that is available, especially for a subscription ongoing payment. So a lot of work needs to be done on that before we really cross that barrier. So we are actually at a very cottage industry stage right now here to even discuss those products at this stage.
Okay. Can I open the floor to questions, as I say, real questions, not comments or editorials? Okay. Do I have a question for our panel? I know it's after lunch, but please.
Hello. Good afternoon, panel. I'm Arpit Maheshwari from Hindustan Times. When we started the conversation, we talked about that Economist or WSJ and FT took 20 years to get million subscribers on board. But if we see the major change in subscription came from last decade, NYT started in Time Select in 2005. With digital revolution in India and Jio coming to picture and more people coming on mobiles and to digital platforms, what is the time frame we can think so that Indian audience will be primed or mature to pay for subscription? If we take today, for example, as 2018. So in how many years? Maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 10? Look, you can give your insights on this.
Okay. Should we just go along the panel?
A lot really will, in my view, will depend on the product offering that we really provide to the user. Because a lot of investment actually needs to go in both the technology aspect of the product and also the content and actual product making for paid subscribers. If you are able to invest early, I think those goals can be reached much faster. But yes, this is a long haul thing. It is not that through a subscription-driven model will be any faster than the ad-driven model that is existing right now. Because for sure, when you move towards a subscription product, there is a challenge on the advertising part of your business. And so as a balance, it will take that long period of time for the industry to evolve. So it is a long haul. I don't think it is something that you will see over the next 3-4 years. But eventually, if you are able to invest right, create proper products, I think it can be speeded up.
Okay, anybody else?
I personally don't think, we need to look at that construct of, when will we get to 5 million subscribers? Because I don't think it makes any sense at all. India is a very different market. You may have a lot of internet users, but when you compare, let's say, a WSJ or an FT, in the markets that they're operating, there's like decades of history of, readers valuing those and paying significant amount to subscribe to newspapers and, institutional trust, all of that, right? So when they finally converted to digital, it was all of those factors cascading and finally getting people to pay for online, right? So in India, I mean, unfortunately, that's not true. Most people do not value news. Most people do not think news is like, something that they should pay for or should be more than a few rupees, right? So you're kind of getting over that cultural, history and baggage of, I don't pay for this. So therefore, I think instead of, setting some kind of a 5 million or 10 million number and saying how many years does it take, I think the other way to look at it, the way we look at it, is to say that we are here and the people who are paying for us, are giving us these amounts of money, and this is this thing. Can we grow 50%, 100% year on year? And if that's the case, then there's nothing wrong with it. There's no reason to kind of benchmark yourself up against the NITs and WHs of the world on a 5-year horizon, because I can tell you, you're going to fail. It's not going to happen.
So can I just add to that a couple of things? So I think a million number looks very exciting. It's a headline number which people can tom and talk about. But if you start digging deep, right, you look at the kind of subscription offers that you see in your feeds on maybe a Twitter or a Facebook, right? $1 subscription. That goes into that 1 million, right? So we must understand the business model. Creating premium content is a fixed cost model. After you hit the threshold and break even, every dollar ultimately is going to your bottom line. So while your fixed costs are high initially, when you have very low subscribers, eventually as your subscribers grow, renewals happen, and your base keeps increasing, some point of time you hit a break even. And after that, your sensitivity to price becomes elastic. So you can actually go out. The second point is, when you look at the headline number of a WSJ or a New York Times, for them that's the global market. Our content is largely India-centric at this point of time. Hopefully in the next 5-10 years, the economy becomes more integrated, India becomes more relevant in the world context, and you also add a lot of subscribers. So again, I said, we are not putting a timeline to the numbers, but those numbers can be achieved at some point of time. And sometimes the numbers themselves are misleading. So you should not be too carried by the numbers itself. You should dig deep. To give you some other differences between the US market and the Indian market, the subscription of a WSJ in the US, and I've been following this industry for the last 20 years and trying to figure out, whether a paid model will work out or not since 2002. The newspaper was at a premium and the digital was at a discount, right? Today, if you look at it, you take any newspaper, whether it's Business Standard or Mint or FE or ET, and you look at the pricing that we have put for our products, it's at a premium. So we actually, we have a baggage of a discounted print product, which we are now trying to change and say, the digital version is actually at a premium. Now, from a print premium to a print discount or digital discount is an easy sell. The other way around is a more difficult sell. So our timelines will be different, our models will be different, our market size will be different, our strategies will be different. Having said that, it's not going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years. It's a long haul, and I think all of us believe in it, and that's why we are here.
So it's that point about conditioning readers what to expect and training them over time. And I think in other markets you do see the evidence of that. I mean, if you take something like Netflix, who believed that people would pay what they pay for a film service? Money comes from nowhere when you give people who can afford to pay something they really want, and that's part of the training, isn't it? Okay, any other questions? Yes, the boss. So.
When you look at what your potential market is, and you could peg it against the number of people who are paying for newspapers, business dailies, okay? I don't know how you define that market. What is the kind of percentage of that do you target and say, that is the percentage of people I think who would pay for it?
Shrikant, I'll be completely honest. We never looked at it like that. Because a lot of this analysis, so it's very MBA-ish, saying that what's your TAM, and how do you break it down, and and the way we started was we were 4 of us who said, let's just do stories and see whether anybody will pay for it, right? And then we're fine, 100 people are paying for it, will 1,000 people pay for it? And then, the next level. So,
sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
please.
On the other hand, you were starting from scratch, but there's ET, there's BS.
Absolutely.
They have a legacy.
So, so they will have completely different answers.
Sense of,
Sure.
what percentage might pay?
So Shrikant, I think the gentleman explained that it took 20 years in European and US markets to really, for digital to go beyond print subscriber levels. And there are two factors there. If you also observe what has happened to print subscriptions there, they have come down. So actually the whole part about digital overtaking print is combined with the print coming down effect. In India, we are still not seeing that print coming down effect. Frankly, even though we have a newspaper product and we went paid, we have not really analyzed it in that manner, but we'll be happy that over the next 4 or 5 years, if we can really go up to 50% of our subscriber base, of the print subscriber base as our digital subscription levels.
Okay, yes.
Hi, my name is Sachin. I have a question for Rohin. Not a very serious one. Who writes the emailers for the Ken? They are probably the best written emailers anywhere in the world, maybe.
Thanks, I'll take that feedback. And it's not any one person, it's usually one of the 4 co-founders, and we've got a couple of loose rules. One is that whoever's writing the day story should never write the email, because then it's the same person, writing the email and summarizing this thing as well. And 2, it should never be 2 people back to back on, so we kind of so it's like a hot potato that gets passed around, in the evening, saying that who's writing tomorrow's mail, and sometimes it's like, hey, I want to write. Sometimes it's like, I have too much work and someone else write. So it's not any one person.
Cool. It's really cool the way you guys write those emails. Of course, your stories are great as well. But,
thanks.
Okay, at the back. Yes. Yes, sir. Have you got a microphone near you? No. Here's a microphone here. Yeah. Otherwise, we won't hear you.
Hi,
Okay.
This is Chandan. Is it working? Hi, this is Chandan. Actually, I'm from Economic Times. I have a question. Actually, both of 3 subscription-based news model. I haven't seen any different kind of experiment with content format. Basically, as Arvind said, that user acquisition is kind of different here and kind of challenging initially. So I think as a general news, we see video consumption and audio consumption is better than text format. And I haven't seen any of different kind of content format. So when can we expect that maybe Ken or ET Prime start introducing videos or audio format to better engagement?
You want to take that?
Yeah, so first off, we don't chase engagement at all. It's literally not a metric for us. So it doesn't matter whether you are engaged with us. Usually engagement is a metric when you want to convince advertisers that, look, my consumer are engaged with my site, therefore my advertising rate is this, right?
I guess
And
video again is if that is a better engagement. That's why we can. I'm as a user will use better way or understand better way videos format or even audio format.
Yeah, so
I don't have time to read daily or.
Yeah. So
200
okay,
words.
I'll put it this way, right? There are 1.3 billion people in India. We are not writing for all 1.3 billion. I'm sure there are people who, a lot of people write to us and say, can you convert these into audio formats so that I can listen to it in the car? Some people say, can you do it as a podcast? Some people say, but at the end of the day, I have to go back and say, what's the bandwidth that I have and what can I do justice to? I literally, I'm not an NYT that I can take every article and convert it into 7 different formats and have hundreds of people in the newsroom. So I must figure out what I can do best. And so video certainly is not one of those right now. I think we may experiment with things like podcasts, etc. and all that. But again, very tentative experiments.
Okay. Okay, in the middle there. Yes, put your hand. Behind you.
Hi, I'm Clement from the Times Group. We generally see clients nowadays, they spend more on print through MediaNet and advertising. How do you all see it in the near future? Do you think in the near future would the internet spends go up compared to print? If yes, why? If not, why not?
So I think broadly we are already seeing the trends in that direction, right? The rate at which internet spends are growing is much faster than what's happening in the print. India is one of the atypical countries where, even print circulation is still growing. I mean, globally, if you look at Europe, you look at America, you look at Australia, print circulation is on a decline, right? And there are pressures. India is one unique country where in the last 5 years, we still have print growing. So till the time print continues to grow, right, and advertisers believe in it, the revenues in print will continue to sustain the business model, and we'll see, sustenance happen. But at the same time, we are seeing shifts happening towards digital. And the shifts will happen both from print and television. It will not be restricted to print because as we've been listening through the day, video consumption is growing at a much faster pace. And there will be certain categories of clients who will see value in video, there will be certain categories of clients who will see value in print, and there are certain categories of clients who will see value in the digital. Digital for a large number of players is becoming a performance play. Print and TV is more of a brand play, right? So depending on what your objectives are, where do you want to start your funnel with, there will be a room for everybody, at least in the foreseeable future. We don't know what will happen in the distant future, but even if I look at what is happening in Europe, America, and the newspapers, they still get ads, but they get much lower number of ads now. The circulation numbers are lower. The rates are not something that they can, keep increasing every year. So there's pressure. So I think ultimately in India also we will see the same thing happen. I mean, in a way, the way I call it, we are lucky sitting here because we are able to see the future, right, and prepare for it. We had a 20-year head start on internet. As print media legacy company, for 20 years we knew internet was coming, print is going to slow down. But does it continue for the next 5 years, next 7 years, next 3 years? We don't know. But we do know that that's the experience of the developed markets, and we will get into that same model at some point of time.
Okay. Yes.
If you don't mind.
Oh, sorry. Then ask your question.
Yeah. So, quick question. I'm Srinivasan from Bickerton, and I've been behind a paywall. We've been behind a paywall for the last 12 years. So, this is a question which I'm asking rhetorically. Is there actually the paywall, which is basically the credit card / bank account information? Is that something which actually restricts us from getting more into the subscription format? Because many people are simply not prepared to part with sensitive information which they don't believe either we or the network companies or whoever it is have access to. So is there any other way out of it? Are some of the big
Unfortunately, there is none, and what you're saying is a serious issue, because right now, if you really look at ongoing payments, recurring payments, only they are supported by credit cards or a couple of banks' debit cards right now, and that too has been very recent change. So a lot needs to be done on that front, and also I think the quality of transaction completion at the intermediary level is a serious challenge right now. So I think in addition to whatever one has to do on the product, there is a significant technology challenge that we'll have to overcome. And hopefully things will improve. I think the regulations will change to permit net banking and other debit cards to come to offer recurring payments. And I hope even for payment wallets that becomes true. So I think then we'll certainly see a big jump in numbers, because you're absolutely right. There is a reluctance on the part of a lot of users to part with information. A lot of Indians don't even have a credit card. And I'm talking of people who are, at very high positions and owners of businesses. They are reluctant to have credit cards. So you're absolutely right.
I can't speak for business standard and economic times, but I can say with certainty that this is not a factor for us. Couple of reasons. One, I fundamentally believe that the amount of choice that Indian consumers today have when it comes to available instruments to pay online is really unprecedented around the world, right? So if you, so for instance, we work with Razorpay and Stripe, and between the two of them, from net banking to credit cards to debit cards to UPI to Paytm wallets, etc. and all that, I don't think there's any country in the world, with possibly the exception of China, but China is also a fairly monolithic market when it comes to 2 or 3 instrument providers, right? So Personally, I don't think that's an issue. And I'm saying this from the context of people who want to read the Ken, but feel that they don't want to kind of share this thing. I mean, like, I don't know who such people would be, right? If they exist, they probably not are readers. Because I think that question comes much ahead. Like, do you buy stuff on Flipkart? Do you buy stuff on Amazon? Do you not give? And if you haven't crossed that chasm yet, then I mean, sorry to put it bluntly, perhaps you would not be reading the Ken and the stories that we're putting out. But as I said, it's different for different.
Okay. So I'll just like to add one point. So basically, from what I understand, what you're saying is a cash on delivery kind of a model, right? So from a business audience perspective, I can relate to some segment of people, who would probably fall in that bucket. I know a lot of CEOs, who still get their secretaries to take a printout of their email and then they'll dictate it to the steno and they will go and type their response to the email. So if that's the kind of audience we're talking about, the other thing they need besides the payment solution is, they want to take a printout of the article itself, which at least our site blocks today, right? Because then it's like pilfered and distributed on WhatsApp and, defeats the model. So there's a challenge, not the payment part, but the second part, which is a larger challenge that we need to figure out and address. And that's the reason why. Otherwise, it's very easy to do. I mean, and we might be launching something in that, but not with that audience and intent. It's a very different intent, though.
Okay. We'll just take one more question. We're obviously running way over time. But one more question before we wind up this panel.
If we talk about the smaller cities of India or even rural India, what it will take to pay them for content?
Entertainment.
So it's a question that we've been kind of considering more and more these days, which is fundamentally that we do, seriously in-depth journalism, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 words each day on sectors. And sitting in cities like Bangalore, Delhi and Bombay, the assumption is that, look, nobody's going to pay outside these cities, right? Because nobody wants it. But we're increasingly coming around also to the point of view that it's perhaps nobody's offering it to them in languages that they're comfortable with. It's surfacing it to them in a way that they can trust. And I'm increasingly coming round to that point of view, but it's not an easy problem to solve. I would like to kind of do something about it, or at least run some experiments around it. We'll probably do something this year, but it's a very valid question. It cannot be that non-English speaking or non-urban Indians do not want to read better journalism, or that they will only read free stuff.
Okay, thank you very much, Rohan. I think Rohan's comments there, not an easy problem to solve, might be the description of our discussion. We've talked about the need to get your model right, to decide what you're able to sell, what content you're able to sell, what people will, which people will pay and what they will pay, and then over time train them and condition them and work towards getting them to pay what you need them to pay, and it's gradual. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and will you thank the panel?